Good evening and welcome to this magnificent venue, Trinity's Examination Hall, for tonight's inaugural lecture to be given by Professor Neville Cox. I'm so pleased to see so many of you here to join us for what I assume will prove to be an entertaining and very topical and important talk. This is certainly the biggest crowd I've seen for an inaugural during my 5 years as faculty dean. So we are officially gathered here today to celebrate Neville Cox's elevation to a personal chair, the newly named Chair of Law and Morality. He chose that himself. He might explain to us why. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gail McElroy, and I am Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, your chair for the evening. And in fact, this is my last inaugural as Dean, but hard to think of someone I would rather celebrate with this evening. So I'm really, really pleased to be going out with Neville's inaugural. A particularly warm welcome to the Provost, Dr. Linda Doyle. We're also joined by a bevy of other college officers, and the ones I'm going to leave out are going to be annoyed, but the Vice Provost, Orla Shields, is here, the Bursar, Eleanor Denny, the Senior Lecturer, David Shepherd, the Dean of STEM, Sylvia Draper, and my eyesight is so bad I can't see the rest of you. But we are also joined by the Pro-Chancellor, Mr. Frank Clark, and the Chancellor of the University, Dr. Mary McAleese. So welcome to you all. We're also delighted to be joined by the outgoing head of the law school, Professor Quaveen McMuillon, and the incoming head, Professor David Kenny, both great chums of Neville's. And most importantly, a very, very special welcome to Neville's family, his wife Sharon, and his children Sebastian, Martha, Jessica, and Jamie. For those of you for whom it is your first inaugural here in Trinity, inaugurals are a significant event in an academic staff member's career. Inaugural lectures provide newly appointed professors with the opportunity to showcase their research to the college community and members of the public. They are joyous occasions when we come together as a community to celebrate our colleagues' excellence. At Trinity, inaugural lectures are a ceremonial occasion, which is why both Neville and I are wearing academic gowns. Neville is sporting the very dashing scarlet PhD gown of Trinity, faced with yellow. I'm in the slightly more garish American gown of my alma mater, where the yellow represents a dandelion field. Professorships in law are almost as old as our university, with the second oldest continuous established chair in Trinity dating to 1668, the Regius Professor of Laws, currently held by Mark Bell, who I assume is here somewhere in the audience. There were several other professorships in law added in the 18th and 19th century, but it may come as a surprise to learn that it wasn't until the early 1930s that the first full-time lecturer in law was appointed. And astonishingly, it was not until 1962 that a second full-time staff member was added when the first full-time professorship was created. With the elevation of Neville to this professorship in law and morality, there are now 5 full-time full professors in law and over 30 full-time staff in the Trinity Law School. Over the course of the last 60 years, the law school at Trinity has overcome its modest part-time beginnings and emerged from the shadow of the schools of medicine and divinity to establish itself as the leading provider of legal education in Ireland, with apologies to all of you here with UCD degrees, and it now ranks in the world's top 100 and the top 30 in Europe. With almost 1,000 students, the law school's flagship degree in single honours law, along with the joint honours degrees in law and French and German and political science, attract the very, very best students in Ireland and from abroad, with median entry points hovering at 600 at present. The law school is in a major exciting period of expansion at the moment, with growing numbers of students each year and exciting plans for building expansion to accommodate the needs of these students and the growing number of academic staff. The law school is notable not only for scholarly contributions to Irish society and the law and its training of generations of the finest legal minds, but also its major contribution to public life and public debate, with notable former graduates and professors such as President Mary Robinson and Mary McAleese and Kader Asmel, Minister for Water Affairs and Education in post-apartheid South Africa. All of which brings us to this evening's headliner, Professor Neville Cox. Neville graduated with first-class honours from Trinity in 1993 and gained his PhD in 1998. He was a bit of a wunderkind. He joined the law school as a junior lecturer in 1996, teaching legal systems and methods in torts law, before going on to introduce more exciting modules such as sports law and medical law. He's also a former practicing barrister specializing in medical, defamation, and sports law. Neville is a prolific scholar with 2 published books in 2022 alone. In total, he's produced 10 books, 21 book chapters, and 35 journal articles in the course of his career. Neville's research has been transformational, which is the bar to get a professorship in Trinity, in 2 distinct domains. First, in Irish legal practice, where his work has influenced judges and legislatures as they make and develop law. His work on defamation law has been cited by the High Court, the Court of Appeal, and by the Supreme Court, most recently in 2022, where it was described as magisterial. Neville's work on defamation law has transformed the operation of Irish defamation law and will be at the heart of the most important and transformative reforms in this area in 60 years. Within academia, Neville's work on the interplay between Islamic law and human rights has also been transformational, challenging the basis for European laws prohibiting the wearing of certain forms of head or face covering. His book in 2019, Behind the Veil, a critical analysis of European anti-veiling laws, has been described as field-defining. But Neville is so much more than an exceptional scholar and legal practitioner. He's the very definition of a good citizen and has served in a number of major roles here in Trinity. His commitment to education is illustrated by the fact that he has been both Director of Teaching and Learning at both undergraduate and postgraduate level in the law school, the only person in the law school to have held both roles. He was also Dean of Graduate Studies from 2016 to 2020, where he introduced measures such as the Thesis Committee model and a distance PhD program, and more generally ensured a heightening focus on PhD students' interests, which we see play out under our current Dean of Graduate Studies in the Postgraduate Renewal Programme. Currently, Neville is the University Registrar, where in addition to his very moving, warm and uplifting speeches at each and every graduation, if you haven't been, you should just pop along to hear them, he's also spearheaded other impactful measures aimed at changing the culture of our university, expanding, for instance, the number of people who can apply for the honorary degree of Maggio. But in order to give you a flavour of the truly transformative impact of Neville on people's lives, it's probably best to hear the words of his former students and current colleagues. So here are just a handful of the many, many tributes paid to him when they were sought. So prepare to be mortified, okay? So I'm going to start with some former undergraduate student comments which were given anonymously. And some of these are very moving, so have some tissues. As someone who suffers with self-confidence and a heap of imposter syndrome, Neville sees right through that and never stops reassuring me of how proud he is of me and of all his students. Neville will make you see things in yourself that you can't, and for that I will be forever grateful. On behalf of all students past and present, Gurav Mila Mahagut, Neville, as you once said to me, I hope you know how extraordinary you are. Another former student wrote, my first memory of Neville Cox is from my JF Freshers Week. It was the initial orientation at the law school. Neville bounded into the room of nervous students and gave a speech about what we could expect from the next few years. The following lines have stuck in my head. The law school is full of doors. If you come to one that is closed, push it open and walk through. This is good advice for physically getting around the building, but it's good advice for life too. Neville, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for getting me through the door. Yet another, everything I learned in Trinity, in bad times and in good, has enabled the life I live now. Neville helped me through the bad times and was there on the piano for so many of the good. I'm indescribably grateful for all of you. Now a couple of attributable quotes. From his former PhD student and current colleague, Gemma O'Farrell-Keeling, I'm fortunate to know Professor Cox as a student and a colleague. He has made a lasting impression on me, not only a brilliant lawyer, but a brilliant human and friend. Ivana Batchik, former colleague, who may be here this evening, Neville is an utterly loyal and generous friend, a truly collegiate person, and always committed to doing right by students. And finally, 2 anecdotes from his good friend and colleague, Oren Doyle, who unfortunately cannot be with us this evening. Neville is a man of the utmost integrity. I once won a restaurant voucher in a raffle, but our office was so messy that he decided it was a bribe submitted with an exam script by one of his students, and so he threw it out. Another slightly more colourful one. Neville registered himself as a bride on a wedding planning website to see what people were saying about his gospel choir. then decided to leave a review of his own choir, saying that the choir were decent, but he'd heard the director was a bit of a drunk. Oren commented, in the process, he was testing Jerry White's question of whether someone can defame themselves. And hopefully we'll get an answer to that this evening. And so before I hand over to him, I would just like to add that Neville embodies the very best of Trinity, and I only wish we could clone him. It's been a great privilege to know him for so long. So tonight, the man, the myth, the legend, Neville Cox, is going to talk to us on good name, social belonging, and the reform of Irish defamation law. Thank you, Neville.
I've kind of an overwhelming urge to swear at the moment, which I'm putting down to nervousness. It's a huge, huge honour for me to be here present this evening. It's a particular honour to be welcomed by Gail McElroy, who's been a wonderful faculty dean, but far more importantly is just one of my best friends. And it's really moving to me that you're here, each individual one of you. It means such a lot to me, and for reasons I'll explain later on. I'd like, if I may, particularly to thank my friend and colleague, Professor John Gilmer, the head of the School of Pharmacy, who so kindly sent me a message this afternoon saying, quote, "Just don't be yourself, we need a break from that stuff." So thanks very much. One of the issues which I find is posed by virtue of the very diverse nature of the audience here is trying to work out how to pitch what I'm going to say, because for the lawyers who are present, you might want to hear something which is legally topical. And for those of you who aren't fortunate enough to be lawyers, you might want to hear something which is scholarly. And for the vast majority of people who've spoken to me earlier today, you want it to be short because there's a wine reception afterwards. And what I want to talk about is the future of Irish defamation law. But I'm conscious that these events are supposed to be somewhat retrospective. It's supposed to be, to some extent, a journey through my academic career. But the problem with that is that there'll be plenty of people who could do this really effectively. But if I was to start doing something like that, I'd sound like Alan Partridge. And in any event, the story of my academic career and my life, and I've been thinking about this over the last couple of weeks, it's never been about me. It's always been the story of the quite extraordinary kindness and generosity that I have been relentlessly shown by so many people. For me, it's been the story of being a member of multiple communities which have just been incredibly good to me. I entered this university in 1989, and though I didn't know it at the time, I was the epitome of privilege. I was white, I was male, I was heterosexual, I was middle class, I was educated. And that privilege, and I've come to own that privilege now and realize that it is what it is, but that privilege for me was buttressed constantly, and has been since, by the bewildering generosity that I've been shown by other people. And for me, that is the connection between my career and what I want to talk about this evening, because I don't want to talk about specific reforms in relation to defamation law. What I want to talk about is what I see is the good community, and what reforms of defamation law will say about the kind of community that we live in now and that we might want to live in. Now, writing in relation to how speech interacts with moral values and with counter-values has been, I suppose, the bulk of my career's work. And I've written books on the topic, except that I haven't really. I've co-authored. And I've co-authored with some marvelous people. And I want to call them out this evening. In the area of sports law, my dear friend Alex Schuster. In the area of employment law, Des Ryan, and most recently Val Corbett and Mark Conlon. But particularly tonight, given the topic, I want to mention Owen McCullough, Senior Counsel, who has written with me in the area of defamation law, a towering intellect and a person of quite extraordinary generosity towards me. And a huge amount of what I know about defamation law, I know because of Owen. But as I say, what I want to talk about at this time where defamation law is imminently facing reform in this country is what this says about our community. For the uninitiated then, what is defamation? Well, defamation arises whenever there is the publication by one person of a statement about another person that has the effect of undermining their reputation in the eyes of reasonable people in the community. And this can happen in any number of contexts, where a journalist publishes an article in a newspaper or in a television program, or where a spotty 13-year-old posts something offensive about another spotty 13-year-old on Facebook, or indeed at the reception after this event, if I have a couple of drinks and start spreading rumors about David Kenny. It's all pretty much the same thing. It's about the idea of one person undermining the reputation of another. And what this means is that there are two distinct interests at play. First, the right to freedom of expression, that noble cornerstone of democracy enjoyed by the publisher of the material. But secondly, and I believe equally critically, the concept of the right to a good name of the person who is undermined by the statement. And Ireland is very unusual in this regard. Ireland is one of very few jurisdictions, only two in the European Union, that has an express constitutional protection for the right to a good name. And so when we talk about reform of defamation law, we're not just talking about sort of piecemeal developments. We're talking about the question of how the balance between these two competing rights should play out, and particularly, should it be tilted in favor of one or other right. And the vast bulk of the changes, which this time last year were proposed in the heads of a defamation bill, seek to tilt the direction of Irish defamation law in favor of the publisher. Now, the way in which this has been argued for in multiple contexts seeks to do two things. The first is to heighten the value of the right to freedom of expression. And I should stress, incidentally, that tonight I'm not in any sense arguing that freedom of expression isn't important. I think it is, though I also think that in an internet social media era, it needs to recalibrate and reposition its value. But the argument is that freedom of expression is a right which is personally very important and has huge societal importance. And this argument is heightened by linking freedom of expression to demonstrably worthy contexts of expression. For example, and most obviously, the context of genuinely responsible, ethical, investigative journalists. And the message is clear. If this is the measure of freedom of expression, then it must be something which is personally important to the rights holder and also societally critical. By contrast, the right to good name is systematically undermined. And Patrick Gary, writing in this area, says that all of the reforms of defamation law in the last century have involved the systematic undermining of the right to a good name. In the first place, it's suggested that the concept of good name has no societal importance. It's just something which is important to the individual. And secondly, it's not even that important to the individual. And this message is conveyed by connecting the concept of good name with contexts where it is argued for in situations which might be regarded as trivial. Do you remember in the summer of 2022 how we were treated to the delights of a trial in the High Court, the Wagatha Christie trial, £4 million spent in legal costs so that two wives of former soccer players could have a spat. And the message is clear. If this is the measure of good name, well then it's something which isn't to be taken seriously. Worse, the link is drawn between good name and those who would use good name to, as it were, distort or abuse processes. Those who would take what are called strategic lawsuits against public participation, where if I'm faced with a journalist about to write a story about me that I don't like, I'll issue multiple legal proceedings against them, as it were, to batter them down so that they don't actually publish the story. And the message again is clear. Good name isn't just something with no social importance, it is potentially antisocial. Now, what I want to suggest tonight is that, in fact, good name is something which is absolutely critical individually to those who are most vulnerable in society, and that the manner in which good name is vindicated by law generally is something which presents very significant societal benefits. And in order to get there, I want to distinguish between three things. First, the concept of good name or reputation. Secondly, the right to good name. And thirdly, the manner in which it's vindicated. So first of all, what is reputation? What is good name? Well, reputation is not what you think of yourself or how you value yourself. And it's not even how the person beside you values you. Reputation is a set of community judgments. According to Nick Emler, reputation is that set of judgments a community makes about the personal qualities of one of its members. More to the point, it's not a factual judgment. It's not saying Linda Doyle is the provost of the university. That's factual. It is a moral evaluation of your worth. And it has a huge impact. Your reputation within a community determines how you are positioned because it deals with critical questions. Are you talented? Are you likable? Are you beautiful? Are you trustable? And whether we're talking about a micro community like your family or perhaps your workplace, or a broader community or the community at large, that is what reputation does. And it's hugely important for what Emler calls informal social economies. Humans are unique of all the species because we are the only species that can form a judgment about another person without direct interaction with them. Chimpanzees can't do this. A chimpanzee can judge another chimpanzee, but only after interacting with them. Humans do and can make judgments about other humans without ever having met them. And the way they do this is through reputation. And this happens all the time. Patrick Gary says that modern social systems depend on individuals' ability to deal with others whom they've never met, and reputation becomes the means by which distinct and diverse peoples can know and cooperate with each other. If you think about it, it's absolutely critical to the way we do business. Who will I vote for? Will I employ this person? Do I want to hang out with this person? Particularly, do I trust them? It's all determined by reputation. So reputation is this enormous social force. But it's not the same as the right to reputation, because I have absolutely no right over what any one of you think of me. I may think I am the most beautiful, most wonderful person ever, and I do, but I don't have any right over your verdict. You may think less of me than I do, and I have no entitlement over this. So the right to a good name is something really specific, and it's caught up with defamation. And it means just one thing. It means that I have a right that the community's judgment of me is not distorted or corrupted by the actions of another person providing the community with false information. That's it. My right isn't against the community, even though the harm is done in the community. My right is against the person who corrupts the community by providing them with false information. And how then is this right vindicated? And for me, this is absolutely critical, because it seems to me that at the end of a defamation trial, when the plaintiff, the person bringing the action, is successful, three distinct things happen, and they all involve the community. First, the community says, yes, the statement that we received about you was false. You were wronged. It calls out falsehood. Secondly, the community says, on foot of that false information, we made a wrong judgment about you in lowering your reputation. We made a mistake. We got it wrong. And thirdly, and most importantly, as Robert Post says, the effect of a verdict is to rehabilitate. The community says, you were wronged and now we restore you to the position that you should have been in before this wrong happened. We welcome you back to the reputational position that you should have been in. And it does this typically through an award of damages. And it seems to me that from a societal perspective, this capacity to call out falsehood and to rehabilitate one of its members that has been cast adrift from society by the wrongful action is critical. But let me start with the first point. Why is the right to a good name very important? Why is the measure of the significance of good name not the Agatha Christie trial? Well, this takes me back to when I lectured the topic, and I've lectured this topic for about 20 years. And in order to be the sort of provocative lecturer, I would say things like, why do you get worried about what people think of you? I don't care what people think of me. You can write what you want about me. I don't care. Until I realized that what I was doing was boasting. And I wasn't boasting about myself. I was boasting once again about the manner in which my communities had supported me. Because of course I don't care what someone writes about me, because I am buttressed in the community by the waves of love with which I've been consistently hit. But let's consider what a hit to your reputation does. Reputation is about your social identity. Undermining your reputation threatens your social identity. It is, in other words, a matter of deep existential uncertainty. And here's the thing. Reputation is a moral judgment. And I remember writing an article back in 2013 where I was looking at the relationship between rights and religion. And I tried to make the point that people base their lives on moral judgments and moral opinions. But moral opinions, by their nature, cannot be factually proven. I may base my life on the existence of God or on the concept of the dignity of the human person, but I can't prove factually either of those things. And the consequence where someone bases their life on something that they can't prove is invariably insecurity. And that insecurity can manifest itself in intolerance. And if you don't believe me, look at any TV situation where two people are arguing the opposite sides of the abortion debate. Insecurity because you cannot prove your moral proposition manifesting as intolerance. But in the concept of reputation, if you are someone for whom your position in society is existentially significant, and if you cannot prove it, and if you are insecure, this is going to represent the perfect storm. You see, the measure of the significance of good name is not the person who is secure in their position. It is the person who is vulnerable. It is the person who, in the words of the poet Tagore, is the poorest and the lowliest and the lost. The person who most needs the care of the community. The right to clean drinking water, frankly, does not impact me because I know where it's coming from. But the measure of the right to clean drinking water isn't me. It's the person who needs it. And for me, the measure of the right to a good name is not the person who is secure in their position in society. It's the person who is vulnerable. And I think this is really important. Because if I think that if rights are to have any significance in our society, and if our society is to be one where the dignity of individuals is to be protected, then this is an incredibly salient lesson. For me, probably the biggest learning in my career in relation to defamation was the moment when I realized that the way I approached my classes was beyond arrogant and had to be stopped. So that's why I think that the notion that the measure of a good name is triviality or abuse is simply wrong. But what about the concept of social importance? If the right to a good name is one which can be, for those who are most vulnerable, extraordinarily significant, why then do I conclude that it also has significant societal importance? Well, this goes to the concept of what I term the good community. Again, I've just been surrounded by good communities all my life. And for me, a good community, the kind of community we might be proud of in Ireland in 2024, has three indispensable elements. The first is a preoccupation with truth. No society that isn't firmly focused on truth is, I believe, worth the candle or has any capacity to sustain itself. Trinity has always been, for me, the most wonderful place to work. And if you look at the institutions in Europe that have survived the last 500 years, the vast majority are universities. And this isn't, I believe, because they've got nice campuses, decent staging in Front Square, and are a bit of crack. I believe that they survive because they have the noblest missions. The pursuit of truth and knowledge, wherever you can find it, to improve local and global society. It sounds glib, but it isn't. It's astonishing. It's the life force of this university. And I believe all communities, if they are to be meaningful, must pursue truth. Now, in the past, the argument was always made that if you wanted a society that respected truth, then freedom of expression was the only game in town. That what we needed firmly to welcome truth was an ever-expanding marketplace of ideas, where corruption in high places should be shown up for what it was, where we could further the needs of intelligent self-governance, and where we could reject out-of-date social orthodoxies by questioning. And again, I don't for a second reject the notion of freedom of expression, and in addition, I don't think, incidentally, that there's any societal benefit in protecting reputations from true statements. But I do wonder whether there is a need to rethink the philosophical basis for freedom of expression in 2024, where there is a risk that the marketplace of ideas is simply saturated. At any one time on the internet, it's estimated that there are 100 trillion words. And we know that many of them are false, and many of them are intentionally false. And we know also that we continue to be impacted by President Trump's brilliant and completely grossly unethical characterization of material that doesn't suit him as fake news. This appalling message to the people of the most powerful nation on the earth that they shouldn't trust accepted sources of truth. To my mind, there's an argument that the truth-based society may need not merely to encourage more and more information into the marketplace of ideas, but may need to ensure better information, and particularly to have the capacity to call out untruth. But that's the first element when the right to a good name is vindicated in a defamation trial. Falsehood is called out. Secondly, I believe in the concept of a cohesive society. Defamation is, I think, something which has very tangible impacts. I remember when I was a barrister going into a consultation in a case involving a well-known Irish person who was always very gregarious and full of joie de vivre. And I remember going into that consultation and being shocked. It was the first and only time that I've had an experience where I could say that someone was a shell of their former self. This wasn't someone who was just sad or angry, though he was both. This was someone who'd been completely set adrift by what had happened. And this is actually obvious. Can you imagine a student society here in Trinity and some appalling thing is written about one of its members by another? Do you expect that person to rock up the next day and say, well, another day's happened, let's carry on? Of course not. The nature of the human dynamic means they will leave, and society and the community will be fractured. Bryson Kerr says, society also suffers harm from an injury to an individual's reputation in the form of unduly diminished interaction. Protecting reputation against unjust attack is essential to encouraging social cohesion. And how is this social cohesion to be achieved? Well, let's go back to the rehabilitation element of the end of a defamation trial. What happens at the end of this? The person is welcomed back into society. Their position is restored. Robert Post, who wrote really influentially on the subject in the late 1990s, said that when a jury does this, and I believe only a jury can do this, and for this reason I believe the proposal to remove juries from Irish defamation actions is fundamentally misguided. Post says that when a jury makes the statement, you are wronged, you are welcomed back, this restores, it redeems, and it heals. And I believe that a protection for the right to a good name, where community has been fractured, allows the restoration of a cohesive community. And that's the second reason why I believe that the right to a good name has not just personal, but also societal benefits. But for me, the third reason, the third element of the good community is the most important. Because, and this has been my experience for my entire career, and it's the thing that I feel most passionate about in Trinity at the moment and in my life. I believe you cannot have a good community unless it is a kind community. I believe kindness is the most important thing. And in an era where less than half a kilometre from here, the most vulnerable people to enter our shores are sleeping in tents, and I know are being kicked in the head in the middle of the night for the crack by passers-by. I believe there is a huge social imperative to recapture the concept of kindness. Robert Post has said that good name links to three things, three dominant social values: to property, especially if it's a company, to honour, but most importantly, to dignity. Dignity is simply the business of not treating other people as a means to an end, rather treating them as an end in and of themselves. Not destroying someone's existential security by publishing something about them so that you can look clever, or you can look funny, or you can sell material, but always positioning the other as the most important thing. Post says that the dignity element of good name is served by simple rules of good behaviour, simple rules of politeness and decency. And the defamation law, in his view, quote, can be conceived of as a method by which society polices breaches of its rules of deference and demeanour, thereby protecting the dignity of its members. I believe that this is absolutely critical. Prioritising the concept of good name, I believe, is important for a polite, civilised, kind society. I fear a situation, and with no disrespect to those who publish stories, I fear a situation where the well-being and the existential security of the most vulnerable and insecure in our society is deemed irrelevant when compared to the capacity of other people to threaten that security. Now again, I'm not for a second suggesting that I know the answers to how defamation should be reformed. I believe there should be a heightened protection for the work of genuinely ethical, responsible investigative journalists. I believe there should be a reduced protection for social media companies who, it seems to me, make gigantic sums of money out of operating cesspits that are connected irretrievably to social isolation, to anxiety, and to loss on the part of multiple people. I believe that the jury should not be removed from defamation action. But most especially, I fear a set of reforms that are premised on arguments that have only heard the claims of the right to freedom of expression and that have ignored the personal significance for those who are weakest of their reputations and the societal benefits of allowing these reputations to be restored and protected. And again, for me, this is all because the communities in which I have operated have shown me models of kindness and goodness. And I would wish everyone to have the level of protection and the level of generosity that I've been shown. And so perhaps I might conclude by referring to the 4 communities that have meant the most to me and to thank people who've been involved. The first community is Trinity College generally. As Gail said, in 2016 I went into a college job, and my predecessor, Professor Aidan Long, who's a legend, said to me, you know what, it's a lot of work, but the great thing is you get to meet some really cool people. And she was right. And I have seen some extraordinary things, extraordinary science, extraordinary art and literature, and some extraordinary people. And I'm so grateful to all the people whom I've met and who've been so kind to me throughout the university community. But what I'd like to do is to call out those people who, for me, are under-called out and who make the university go round, our professional, technical and administrative staff. And I want to say a huge thank you to my colleagues in academic registry, in human resources, in estates and facilities, in the library, in the senior tutor's office, the disability services, health and counselling services, the provost office, in Trinity Sport and in Trinity Development and Alumni. The staff are extraordinary. And in particular, and at the risk of mentioning some and leaving out others, I want to thank those staff whom I work with most closely. Breda Walls and Jennifer Pepper, Vicky Butler, Saoirse de Brunner, Shemaine Cleary, Rachel Matthews-McKay, Claire Tracy, the wonderful Niamh Hurley, and the absolutely extraordinary Lorraine Norton. I'm so grateful to work with all of them. The second community is my tribe, the law school. I came into the law school and it was just extraordinary. I was lectured by 4 of the current Supreme Court. I'm really lovely to see Gerard Hogan and Brian Murray here tonight. I'm so grateful that you're here. I was lectured by William Binchy, who became my mentor for my career. I was lectured by Jerry White, who is the model of kindness and decency. And through my entire career, I've been surrounded by these extraordinary academics in a law school which has been brilliantly led since I started by William Binchy, by Hilary Beeler, by Jerry White, by Caoimhin McMahon, by Oren Doyle, by Mark Bell. And it's a tragedy that that's going to end now, but good luck. But again, perhaps I'd really like to call out my professional colleagues in the law school who have meant the world to me for so long, to my darling friends, Mairead Morrissey, Kelly McCabe, and especially the incredible Catherine Finnegan. The third community is the shortest one. It's the 3 people who have influenced me the most and from whose grip of influence I will never escape. Well-known Palestinian carpenter, my mother, and the person who I most wish was here tonight is my father. And finally, the community that's dearest to me, which is the 5 people who do me the honour of sharing their lives with me and who I love with all my heart, which is Jessica and Jamie, Martha and Seb, and my beautiful Sharon. This community in Trinity has been the kind of strong, truth-based community that makes me happy and sustains me, gives me all the security I need. But I really want to dedicate what I've said tonight to 2 units in Trinity, of whom I am inordinately proud, and who have done the job of expanding our community to those who previously would never, ever have had access to it. And so I would like to dedicate everything I've said to every single member of staff and every student working in the Trinity Access Project and within the Trinity Centre for People with Intellectual Disabilities, and especially my hero, Professor Michael Shevlin. Thank you all so much.
So you've now set the bar by which all future inaugurals will be measured a standing ovation. Thank you so much, Neville, for that fabulous talk. Erudite, masterful, very important, but mostly inspiring. We don't normally take questions at these events, but I did promise one of the many undergraduates you inspire a question. So with that, over to Mary Kate. the Trinity Bells, including Neville's daughter, Martha. So a big thanks to them. And a big thanks to all of you for coming this evening, and to everyone who played a part in organising this, Catherine, Valerie, Barbara. Delighted to see so many of you here, and would finally like to thank Professor Cox for what was an amazing inaugural. And please come join us in the Senior Common Room to celebrate with him. Thank you.